looked at GNXT, I think that's what it's called, Kendrick's newest album, and I found it to be very tonally incongruent to his last discography, his last like albums within his discography, and it just didn't make sense that he crashed out to a rapper, and what I guess he dissed him, but rappers diss each other all the time with messages, and I thought that was just hip hop. I thought that was the main idea of this. The reason why they not like us is blew up. It's just like, well, for one, we don't like, the audience doesn't like industry play. So what seems to be an industry play, you know, they just don't make sense being popular, being famous. Which, I mean, makes perfect sense why Drake is famous. You know, he doesn't talk too much about problematic topics. He makes music that people like and that is fun to listen to. He used to be really big about singing music for women, and from what I understand, I could be wrong, this is a little iffy, you know, but I thought women were like one of the highest, like, you know, the biggest spenders about in the economy. But it's like, you know, if he's gonna be making music, he makes music, you know, and he makes music for a fan base that, you know, digs his music, and they give him a lot of support. But I could be wrong about it, I'm not sure. So it's like, I'm not saying it was like a surefire way that he was going to be famous and successful, but he definitely hit all the cylinders when he was really burning real bright. And Kendrick is, you know, his past stuff was just like, you know, humanizing black struggle and poor black people who live in like impoverished areas, and the mental illness that comes along with it. So he's just humanizing black people, and I understand it. But it just didn't make sense that now he's talking about the Hard Part 6 and like, hey, chop it up and, you know, reason with people. And it makes sense why he was telling people to reason with people. But I'm like, dude, you just crashed out on another black man for what? Because you never liked him because he's a suburban black dude? Isn't that what you're going to have your kids to be, essentially? Suburban kids? Or just kids that are going to be far removed from a life of crime, poverty, and mental illness? It never made sense to me when rappers don't like black people who are from the suburbs, but end up in the suburbs when they get famous, or they end up in a very nice situation. And when I heard Kendrick, Lupe Fiasco talk about like, if people had the choice, would they go to a suburbs versus the poverty of the streets? You know, just for what, a chance for you to be very, very famous. I mean, like. Now, he didn't mention that last part, but he said, like, you know, ultimately people will want to go to better conditions, better living conditions. And it makes sense. And to some degree, in my opinion, that also gives them a story, you know, going from rags to riches. So, it never made sense to me why Kendrick was all, what was that? It just never made sense to me why Kendrick was talking about healing and he's humanizing black people. Sure, that's fine. They can't really help, but they don't have resources to help themselves. And then you're being kind of disproportionately targeted by police and law enforcement and things of that nature. And there's the other side to that too, because, you know, they're still doing stuff, but at the same time, it's like poverty and desperation makes you do things you just wouldn't normally do if you had resources and stuff. But it doesn't make sense to me for a person like Kendrick to crash out and say, hey, I still have PTSD. You know, and I'm like, did you talk to Eckhart Tolle? Did you talk to people and you were saying how you try to be more honest and you're searching for help? So I'm like, I'm not entirely sure if he went to therapy or not. That's one thing I'm not sure about. He mentioned in his post that he was like, oh, I'm trying to, you know, he said something about his father didn't search for therapy, so therefore he's not searching for therapy. I don't know. But one thing I do know is that he talked to Eckhart Tolle, and that's not a therapist. He's not a therapist. He's like some sort of spiritual guru. And from what I can understand from the few pages I read for The Power of Now, the dude just abandoned his ego and just doesn't want to go back to that place of neuroticism, you know, anxiety and thinking and being overly self-conscious and stuff like that. And it's understandable because he had depression. But Kendrick doesn't really have depression. Maybe he does, maybe he did. But my thing is just don't talk to a spiritual guru. Talk to a therapist, a actual therapist that specializes in the stuff that you need. And from what I can understand, PTSD is, to some degree, provable. I mean, pretty curable, you know. So I'm like, it didn't make sense to me that he crashed out and used that as an excuse that I'm just a traumatized black poor person I'm like, no, you're a person with money and you can afford a therapist. So it doesn't make sense to me to have this long line of discography talking about trauma, pain, and now that you have this money to solve your problems, you don't solve your problems. And this reminded me of The Good Place, where there's a character named Tahani, and then she has a sister, and she mentioned when they made up, she said, "Oh, I understand you didn't really want to let this go because it helped your creative process." You know, because the lady was very vastly successful than her sister, and you know, this character Tahani resented her for the success, but not only the success, just the unequal love and, you know, unfair competition that that her parents pit her and her sister against. So it's just I can understand that aspect, but what I just don't like the idea that, like, dude, you can fix yourself. You're not that. Now, fine, represent, appreciate your culture, appreciate what you came from, all that good stuff. But like, you're still not like them anymore. You have money. You know, you can technically get whoever you want. You know, and most people, I mean, you know, there's game and whatnot, but like, he's just not in that situation anymore. And sure, he can sit here and say I rep wherever he's at, Compton or something like that, California. See, I don't know, but like, you know, he can say he represents these places, but he's a rich dude representing these places. You know, and you're gonna end up like Nipsey Hussle saying you represent, and then, you know, people get jealous. People don't like it when you in the poor place and you thriving like that. And the thing is, he was trying to help people, but, you know, it's just that those values conflict. Those values really do conflict. So you're gonna find somebody who, and if I'm right, I think it was an informant who off Nipsey Hussle. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I just feel like with Drake stuff, it's not really. You just need to not be so insecure, and he needs to solve his problems and go to therapy. You know, he has this thing where I've seen with other black suburbanites. You know, they got this struggle, this internal struggle. And don't get me wrong, I sort of empathize, but I don't really fully know their stories to why they got to this place. But I know this desire, from what I've seen, this desire to be accepted is it's just not a healthy one, because you're not really trying to be accepted from a healthy person or a healthy entity such as hip hop. Hip hop is not a healthy entity. It's a place where people are not they're just not healed. You know, do you think if they'd be talking about the same stuff, you know, if they didn't have to do any of those things, if they weren't in a poverty, it's just something to think about. So yeah, I think Kendrick needs therapy too. And the thing is, he has money, so I shouldn't hear any F that I got PTSD after the big three, it's just me. No, bump all that, that's stupid. That is so stupid. And I don't care what people say, oh, this is the spirit of hip hop. No, it's the spirit of ignorance. That's dumb. When J. Cole was talking about, hey, we should come together, what do you think he was saying that for? Is that just, I'm like, these people are pretending to be all these other things that they no longer do and they shouldn't do. You shouldn't have to be selling drugs when you're making $1 million. You shouldn't talk about getting at people unless it's just friendly competition. And like, it's known to be friendly competition. It's not like I'm sneak dissing you and I'm insecure and we're just playing it off as culture and I'm dissing you. No, that's just immaturity. If it was just like a movie, you know how movies are, good guy, bad guy, or wrestling. Wrestling's really interesting because sometimes they're not playing around. But like, wrestling is a good example of good storytelling. Why not? People say, no, that ain't real. Okay, find somebody who you can jive with and have a little friendly back and forth, friendly competition. You know? I'm just saying, seeing Kendrick kind of play this role of like, I'm trying to get healing, yet I'm trying to stay hard. It just reminds me somewhat of David Goggins, where he's trying to stay hard, but he lives he's in a better place, you know? So eventually this story of, oh, we're dealing with stuff, but I'm rich, it starts to me, it'll get redundant. That story will get eventually redundant. And if they wonder why the next generations are using their slang and all that stuff, and the Gen Z or the Gen Alpha, they're using black accent and AAVE, well, it's because this stuff is getting popular. So it's just the next stage of things getting like mainstream and commodified. course this stuff is gonna happen. So what do you think, as a person from the streets, is gonna happen when you blow up? The mainstream who like your stuff and made your stuff popular, they're going to make your stuff even more popular, and it's going to be a part of their vernacular because they use it, and it's not just rappers and stuff. It's probably social media folks, and people try to adjust to a culture they've been around, and that's probably very close to like hip hop and whatnot. But yeah, man, it's just, I guess if I could give a nice bow on this, present here, it would just be like, for different reasons, because they, like, both of these artists that in this beef are dealing with things that are outside their control, public perception, things they think is true that probably isn't. They're both two artists that's trying to make it, two artists that's trying to one of them, I guess, has a more I hate to even say it like that, because it's not that, like, I guess, quote unquote accurate display of the culture. That's why they like him. They're feeling him. He's what the culture's feeling, which is Kendrick. And Drake is the opposite of what's quote unquote accurate. And I mention quotes because it's like, to some degree, who cares? They both want to live in a nice place. Who wants to live in poverty? Because it gives you a story? I wouldn't. But yeah, it's just like that whole battle was silly, and that's why I was like, J. Cole, I'm down with that guy, because he's at least, he saw the forest before the tree. He saw the forest before the trees, and he said, "No, I'm good." And yeah, he did bounce in. He's like, but he wasn't really feeling it. It's like, I don't really have a dog in this fight. And I know folks was like, get him, J. Cole. He's like, I'm not really trying to do this. I don't have a real reason why I want to get at people right now, at least for them. So yeah, they both need therapy.